right, you good?
Flashing again?
Yep.
Good. That's it. Goes up. Goes up.
Give me your
There's a
right.
backpack.
No one's
Why
got
would I
dresses,
do that?
it's cool.
Work it out.
Of course you can. Would you like to use the window or are you using the door? I see.
Just faster.
Okay, so non-disclosure agreements or NDAs. Has any one of you ever signed one? Good. Has any one of you ever gotten someone to sign it for your company? Oh shit, there's some of the hands not going up. We have a problem. NDAs are not an optional extra. Absolutely not. Now we can all have a long discussion about our NDAs, what's the legal effect of those. It is not about the legal effect, it's about the morally binding agreement. Somebody signs something that says, hey, you're not supposed to go and tell my secrets to somebody else. There's a much less likelihood that they will actually go and do that because they know they signed something. And they know you could come after them if they did the wrong thing. Now, a lot of NDAs that get signed wouldn't hold a single day in court. And I have that from a lot of lawyers that say, well, it's not worth a piece of paper it's written. It's a morally binding agreement, more than anything, and it's a very effective agreement.
Is it a psychological tactic as well?
I wouldn't, we're on camera, so I wouldn't say that, but yes,
Okay.
it certainly
So,
has.
okay.
It certainly has that.
It's sussing people out with it. Who might
No,
sign it.
but it, yeah.
It is absolutely. It is, that's what I call it, a morally binding
A prenup
agreement. It's a way, it's a prenup, yeah. It's a way of binding them and say, look at them saying, are you okay to sign my NDA? And you go, yeah, I'm happy to sign it. Okay, fine, thank you. No, I've got that, thank you very much, I'll put it in my filing cabinet.
Yeah.
Well, we hopefully will never need that again, will we? No, good.
What about investors?
Well, that's a very good question. So the second word up there is due diligence. So if an investor comes far into your process, and particularly if they're a professional investor, they want to see that whatever IP that you have has been secured. So the main reason that you're doing your NDAs is actually for the investors. So the next question is, will the investors sign one? The answer is, that depends. In the initial part of the process, definitely not. If you're sending them a teaser document or something like that, no way. However, if you're sharing your inner deeper secrets, the patent, provisional patent that you're just about to apply for, your detailed financial model for how you're going to seek world domination, they should. And if they're not willing to do that, you need to discuss with them why the hell that would be so. And so, like, say we've got 2 deals that have been in due diligence the last couple of weeks with an investment firm, and they signed an NDA for that. It's just common practice. There are some particular venture capital firms that go, we just don't sign NDAs just because they want to be ratbacks about it. So in that case, you might just going to go, well, in that case, we're just not going to deal with you. So you need to find out with yourself and with your own moral standing and with your gut feel, is like, are we happy to trust them or are we happy not to trust them?
I think what's interesting is I heard a story from a group of guys who, I suppose these are the scary stories that kind of float around, and he was saying they told some investors about a product that they were interested in launching,
Yep.
and actually the investors then created a very basically created a product based on.
Yep.
So this is the founders of Plausible, so they were looking at other options of crowdfunding, and then another investment firm that they spoke to, they were hoping to raise money from, and
Yep.
created their products.
Okay. So that's probably quite rare. It's very, very rare to see investors do that. I have never heard of that before. And the reason for that is investors invest. They don't
Or
run
was
businesses.
it one investor, was an investment firm?
Even then, it's quite rare. So, but I would come back to Alan and give him the advice is maybe you just didn't really think about who you were sharing this with. Because if you're sharing your secret with someone that has an obvious commercial benefit from doing exactly what you're talking to them about, it's like, duh. It's like, that's just silly.
Yeah.
So where in the NDAs generally have very little effect is if you go and talk to a corporate.
Yeah.
And again, it is not because they're necessarily a bad people, but they act out their own self-interest, and so they should, because they have shareholders too, and that's their edict, right? So if you think about it, you've got this amazing thing of figured out a new way to make a laptop bend backwards as that does, right? And you can flip it around, and you go on, you call whatever, Microsoft, or you call ASUS or one of the other companies and say, I've entered this thing, they're going to go, fucking fantastic. Do you mind, can we borrow your little thing for a week? We just really want to have a close look, just to understand whether we should work with you. And guess what? You know, before you know it, they've invented a new version of that, and it's going to be ever so slightly different from your version, but it's still Hinge. Right, oops. And so if you go and look at HP versus that thing you got there, they've got different versions of the hinges, but they still do the same damn thing, don't they? Yes, they do. So just don't. You cannot, generally speaking, you cannot share a lot with a corporate without expecting that they would just run away with it.
What about also in terms of people you're getting professional advice from? So someone was telling me that there was someone who's providing this free service, giving you business advice.
Oh yes.
And the form that you filled in, and before the session, would say, okay, write down the details of your best ideas. And then apparently in the fine print underneath where you signed it, it said any ideas containing this document are now
The
property of from work. So they were literally just mining everybody's ideas and taking the ownership of all those ideas.
Nothing is free nowadays.
So, who in this room thinks that free is good? I mean, Jesus, pay peanuts, get monkeys? Isn't that obvious? Nothing's changed. Free does not exist. Free and good does not appear in the same sentence. Right, if you want great advice, guess what? You're going to pay for it. If you want good advice, you pay less. If you want shit advice, oh, well, guess what? You can get that for free. You just get there'll be 10 guys out there giving lots of advice and it's totally free, but you don't even need to buy them a beer. They'll buy you a beer for just listening to their great advice they have. True? Yeah. It's not hard. But yeah, free advice is probably shit. But the thing is, to answer your question in a more professional manner, is there is professional privilege. So what is different is when you're sharing this with a lawyer, they're already bound by the Law Society and by an act. And so if they do the dirty on you or run away with your secret, well, guess what? They are in for a really, really interesting time. They don't want that. And again, they're lawyers. They don't want to handle businesses, right? So it's like, what's that? It's like they just don't have time for that kind of thing. I'm sure it's happened, but it's very, very rare that a lawyer and accountant would run away with your great ideas because. So.
What about when you're pitching? Because like you're constantly, you pitch to accelerators, you pitch to, and what I suppose as often in those scenarios they don't sign an NDA, for example.
Nobody does.
So what stops them from it? And I don't say that people do it on purpose, but people are like, oh, you know what, mate? I came across this really amazing idea that we're about to, and that sort of stuff.
So here's my very basic take on this. Ideas are completely worthless. In case you didn't notice that, any one of your ideas are completely worthless. All of them. And not because I'm trying to be rude, but an idea in itself has no value whatsoever. It's the execution upon that idea and the successful execution professionally with enough money and the right team and everything else that may make it worth something. So, and it's actually the difference between an entrepreneur and someone who's not an entrepreneur. So we meet a lot of people that go, oh, I don't want to share what I'm working on. It's like, okay, well, stick yourself, next. I haven't got time for that. Where someone says, I've got this great idea, so okay, that's a really shit idea, but if you do that, it'll be a better idea, go away, come back in a month. And they come back a month later and say, we took that, we shifted it, we already pivoted once more, and I'm not going to team. Well, you just had a story about that, you just pivoted your thing and that distracted a co-founder. Whoopsie. Now that's validation of the idea, it's beginning to take shape. Now you've got someone you can build a team with. If you come back in a month and say, okay, we got the team, we got the first tiny investor, we wrote a business plan, we built a wireframe or whatever the hell it is. Oh, now that we're getting somewhere. This is now the execution upon that idea. Does that make sense? So, idea itself is. As I tend to say, I get 10 great ideas before breakfast every day.
I mean, I don't.
And then by lunchtime, I'll pitch them all going, oh, fuck, what was I thinking? It was completely shit, right?
I don't mean that idea as in, it was just saying that, like, when you pitch to an accelerator, you're what your idea is quite formed, like you might actually have a working prototype.
It's still an
you work-
idea, because
Yeah.
I mean, so again, you got to think about any one of you are working on here. At least 10 kids in India, at least 10 kids in China, at least 10 kids in Silicon Valley have had the same idea and are working about as far as you are with it. Okay, so what? Let the best man or woman win the game. It's just, that's why we always say it's a race to the finish line.
That question, why should you win?
Why should you win? Exactly. Why should you win? It's like, why should you win? Why should you win? It's like, and it's a very revealing question, because if you don't have a big enough reason to win, well, guess what you won't. And whether the reason, well, sometimes we see people that come to us with a reason and we go, well, it's a great reason, it's a very strong reason, but it's the wrong reason. I want to build an aged care facility because my grandmother died. Well, it's got nothing to do with the matter. You're just acting out of grief. It's like, that's lovely, but it's meaningless. I want to cure cancer because my auntie died of cancer. Actually, I've got 3 families. I was spoken to someone last year. I think 3 family members that died of cancer. So she was now in the fight for cancer, and she was trying to invent shit. It was like, you got no idea, you got no scientific background, you got no hope in hell. Sorry, but it's not going to work. Oh yes, but I really want to do it. There's lots of passion around it. For good reasons, but for the wrong reason. Like, it doesn't help you build a great business. Coming out of hurt or loss does not make a great business. Coming out of something that strives into the future to better mankind, or to make more money, or to help people, or whatever the hell it is, or save lives, that makes sense. But just because I had a shit experience at the baker last week doesn't mean I should start a bakery, should it? Doesn't make sense. So, employees. Does anyone here have a plan on potentially having employees in the future? Uh-oh, you're all in trouble. Okay, so important to bind everybody. It is possibly important, particularly if you have multiple co-founders, to have an employee agreement with each other as well. Co-founders are employees as well, I'm assuming you pay them. In some cases we don't pay them. It's like, oh no, you're my co-founder, I don't need to pay you.
I don't pay them.
There we go. Think of what if. So what if this happened, what if that happened? How do we get out of the agreement? Sure, there's a probation period, that's fairly normal, standard is 3 months, you can have it to 6 months if you want. And by the way, you can extend the probation period, even though we set it for 3 months, you can, before the end of the 3 months, you can extend it up to 6. A lot of people don't realize that. That's standard employment law. A lot of big companies actually have a standard 6-month probation period. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of big companies don't realize it means that in 5.5 months, the employee's just going to walk out the door with 1 week's notice. Like, oh, we didn't mean if we use a leave, and it's a bit late. Like, it's already got a new job. Stuff. But you really got to think through what are the different areas. What if this happens? What if that happens? Now, employee agreements are very templated. And again, we can all download 10 of them on the internet. It's not hard. We're going to find something that A, is conforming to current employment law. That's not that hard. But we're going to find something that is actually the type of agreement that we're after, because there's a difference between, say, a bunch of process workers versus someone that is a $200,000 a year management consultant. It is not the same kind of employment agreement that you want. If they're a process worker, I'm not really worried about they're going to run away with my IP and give it to the competition. If they're a management consultant, I might have to take some seriously drastic steps in case they do. Like basically, I own your ass if you go in somewhere, right? For 3 months, 6 months. Absolutely. And so the other thing to worry about is, and you probably don't need to worry about it this year, but there is definitely a difference between, so thank you for that hint, between a common employee, in other words, your marketing coordinator or your whatever not, and an executive that you're hiring in. Because an executive, like a general manager or chief of operating or something like that, yes, you need to have an executive agreement and not a standard employment agreement. And they look very different. They've got some pretty aggressive clauses that tend to take a half page each. And you look at them and go, whoa, that's a bit full on. But those are the terms of engagement if you're going to pay somebody $180,000
So you mentioned co-founder being potentially an employee.
If you're going to pay them as a non-PAYG, they should be considered an employee.
Right, what if they're just co-founder based on a share?
If they just co-founder based on a share, just pay them as a director's fee, then you don't. But then you definitely need other agreements around that. because what actually happens in lots of cases, co-founders get together, it's all rosy and we love each other and we hug every day.
Yeah.
And then things suddenly don't look so rosy and somebody walks away and says, well, I didn't sign anything, so whatever you thought you had together, well, I now have all of it. And you go, well, hang on, what the?
So your co-founder agreement would be the umbrella for that?
Potentially, it could just be the shareholders agreement that also governs the two. So it tends to be the shareholders agreements enough to bind it, plus an NDA.
Yeah.
The last point here is actually the most important. I probably should have put that at the very top. Do not hire anybody unless you have written a full position description. Please, ever. Like, do not do that. The position description is what says what you're supposed to do. We live, unfortunately, in a country where a lot of employees choose not to do what they're supposed to do. It's very common. So the position description, not the employment agreement, is actually the way to terminate that employee if they don't do what they're supposed to do. Because if the position description says you're going to take out the garbage every day, you're going to wash the dishes, you're going to walk the dog, and you're going to call 100 customers every day.
That's marriage, isn't it?
Oh, sorry. Then, and they haven't done it, and they've got 3 warnings, you have every right to terminate. The 3 warnings is a little bit, you can sort of always do it a bit less, because it's grave misconduct, you can get basically summarily terminated. But if you don't have a position description, you don't have a leg to stand on. It's as simple as like you do not have a leg to stand on, because the employment agreement, generally speaking, just says you're hired as a marketing coordinator at $60,000 a year starting on the 1st of July. Okay, so they walked in, they got a business card that says I'm a marketing coordinator, it says so on the email signature, so they can point to the employment agreement and say, I'm the marketing coordinator, what's the problem? Any questions? Oh, oops. Do you see the predicament? That is why this little last point here that seems very benign is super important.
I would have, like, for defining a position in a startup,
Yes?
is not an easy job where the roles and responsibilities change very, very frequently.
Then it's very, very frequently you should rewrite those position descriptions. Absolutely. It is the most important tool to have in here.
Does
And
it
it's-
apply?
Sorry?
Continue. Does it apply to redundancy?
To redundancy? Is that what you said?
Mm.
I guess so. Yes. It's actually an important tool in case of redundancy. Because you can say, well, we don't actually need the sales position anymore because we do everything from marketing. So sorry, I'm going to fire my sales manager, right? Just but it's like, you know, the flip side of it is unfair to an employee if you don't do one. It is totally unfair, and I really mean that very strongly, because you can't expect them to do a great job if they don't know what the hell that great job looks like. And you need to put that in writing. It's not good enough to say, well, if you just smile every day and if you do your job and do everything on time, it's like, that's nothing to go by. Sorry, but they need stronger guidance. They need to know that if they're the marketing coordinator, am I sending out the emails? No, somebody else is doing that. Oh, okay. So am I doing the social person? No, the social person does that. Okay, so what am I coordinating? Oh, you need to do the events, you need to do this. Like, you need to be that specific, not just run all marketing coordinator duties. No, don't. Include in this thing, and I think I have a second slide here, we go.